This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Hello and welcome to mini episode number 460 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have two spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 13th of April 2025. And story number 1 comes from Mayia. I feel that maybe I should say a trigger warning for suicide and abuse. From a young age, I always knew about the paranormal, but I never really started to experience anything odd until I got into my teenage years. I lived in a small town in northern England, and our town was founded in the industrial period. The house I lived in as a child was reasonably new. I still don't know anything really about the land, but I was always open to the paranormal. I grew up a Christian, not a strict one where the paranormal wasn't allowed to be talked about, but we still went to church every Sunday. My father and I began to fall out when I was around the age of 12 or 13. One morning, he woke me up for school, and at the end of my bed, I saw, for only a second, a Victorian boy standing at the edge of my bed. And I know this can be explained away with, I was only just waking up, but it freaked me the fuck out. I can describe him exactly. He looked around 9 to 11 years old. He was entirely silver and white and semi-transparent. He was wearing a sort of ruffle around his neck. I don't know how, but I could tell that he had black hair. I rubbed my eyes and he was gone. About a year later, I had a dream where this woman was trying to kidnap me. It got to the point where I knew I was dreaming, but I still couldn't wake up. And that's when I saw him. The boy. He was telling me to follow him in the dream. And he walked me all the way back up to my house and bedroom. And that's when I woke up. Fast forward another year. By this time, I was about 14. I was home alone after school, and clear as day I heard breathing in my ear. A low, deep male breath, which we followed by a man's voice that said, "I see you." I thought, fuck that, and I ran into my kitchen to grab a knife. Then I went around the entire house because I was convinced that someone had broken in. I always tried to come up with rational explanations. In the summer before my 15th birthday, everything went downhill for me. My father and myself were not in a positive relationship. He would scream at me and I felt helpless. He was not abusive physically, but mentally I believe he was. I developed motor tics, from stress most likely, and I began to have difficulty in school. I think this could have been a reason for more paranormal activity. By the time January came around, I was 15 and my brother was in a bad place as well. As you can see, lots of family troubles. He tried to kill himself and I was sort of in the middle of the whole situation, as my parents were no use. I had to talk to the police. Long story short, he was found and was okay after that. My parents didn't allow me to be sad about it. They expected me to suck it up. I feel like that was important to say for the next few months of my life after that. I would be getting ready for school on a morning and the start of things was me hearing a bang in the kitchen. I went in to find my father's glass on the floor. But the odd thing was that it wasn't smashed and it was pushed under a cupboard. This was very confusing to me as it had fallen at least 3 feet. There was no reason or explanation for how it fell. Not long after that, I was again getting ready for school and again heard a bang in the kitchen. And nothing. There was nothing on the floor, but the bang was very loud. I knew something was off. After that, it was like a gateway for ghosts. I saw shadows of people move across my wall. I once woke up in the middle of the night and my nightlight switched off. Just before it turned off, I saw a woman with blonde, frizzy hair stood in the corner of my room. She had one blue eye and one grey one. I will never forget her face. There's one more thing that I wish to share with you. One night I was dreaming. In the dream, I was just in my house. My parents were there, but something was off. Their faces weren't quite their own. It was like someone else fused with theirs. It scared me a lot when they proceeded to talk in a voice that was not their own at all. All they would say was,
"Don't open the front door."
In the dream, I then proceeded to hear slow, deliberate knocks from my front door. Then I woke up, and I shit you not, from the front door I heard the same knocking. 3 knocks, then a pause. Then again, 3 knocks. I remember it scared me so bad I had a panic attack right there in my room. But I never opened the door. I would not be opening that door either, because if somebody's telling me in a dream not to open a door, and I wake up and a door is knocking somewhere roundabouts, I'm not opening that door. I'm not doing it. I'm assuming that either something is infiltrating my subconscious to tell me not to open the door, or my subconscious itself is telling me not to open the door. And either way, I'm not opening the door. And to be honest, going back to the beginning of this story, it sounds like, you obviously have some sort of connection to whatever it is that was in that house. Initially this Victorian boy standing at the edge of your bed. It's really interesting that this seems to permeate a sleep state. Because I remember reading in a book called Stargirl, about, that state before you fully wake up, that state between sleep and awake is almost like a primal state of being, And I wonder if in that primal state of being, your brain allows you to access things that you ordinarily wouldn't. And therefore, this boy also was in your dream trying to protect you, And I do think that there is some sort of link between psychological distress and the paranormal. I think that if you are in a place of emotional turmoil, I don't know whether it's psychological, I don't know whether it's your brain, your own brain externalizing things that are happening for you internally, or whether or not literally, because you are going through emotional turmoil, paranormal stuff is more attracted to you or whatever. But I do think that emotional turmoil in any which way is something that causes paranormal events. And obviously it sounds like you were going through a huge amount of turmoil at this time, right? And then, of course, things were happening. You weren't allowed to be sad about your brother's attempted suicide, or you weren't allowed to kind of express your feelings around various things that were going on in your life. And then these strange things begin to happen. I feel like those things are intrinsically linked. Today's episode is brought to you by Hormone Harmony. You were probably told that your health starts in your gut. But if you're a woman, it starts with your hormones. And I can tell you from experience that when your hormones are off, everything is off, including digestive issues, mood, energy levels, weight management, and so much more. Hormone Harmony is a game changer for women struggling with hormonal imbalances that leave them exhausted both physically and mentally. It only contains science-based ingredients that bring back comfort, energy, clarity, confidence, and a sense of balance. Happy Mammoth, the company that produces Hormone Harmony, is famous for its zero compromise policy. No GMOs, artificial fillers or flavours or any other junk. Only science-backed ingredients in amounts that are clinically proven. The company surveyed 1,831 women to see how Hormone Harmony helped them. And the results are pretty mind-blowing. 86% of women started losing weight, 77% say it improved their mood, and 100% said they're feeling like themselves again. Hormone Harmony has over 50,000 raving reviews from women all over the world, with 98% of them saying they'd gladly recommend it to their family and friends. You can try Hormone Harmony risk-free and get 15% off your first order with code GHOSTPOD at checkout. That's code GHOSTPOD for 15% off your first order.
This is Jacob Goldstein from What's Your Problem? Business software is expensive, and when you buy software from lots of different companies, it's not only expensive, it gets confusing, slow to use, hard to integrate. Odoo solves that because all Odoo software is connected on a single affordable platform. Save money without missing out on the features you need. Odoo has no hidden costs and no limit on features or data. Odoo has over 60 apps available for any needs your business might have, all at no additional charge. Everything from websites to sales to inventory to accounting, all linked and talking to each other. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
The key to good skin is hidden deep in the ocean. Osea's Undaria algae body oil harnesses the powers of Undaria seaweed for silky, soft, and glowing skin. Clinically shown to instantly improve skin elasticity, Osea's Undaria algae body oil isn't your typical body oil. Get 10% off your first order with code SEAWEED10 at OSEAMalibu.com. Plus, free samples with every order and free shipping on orders over $50.
And our second story today comes from Joel. My family and I used to go on annual holidays to different parts of the Victorian state of Australia when I was younger. We're quite a large family, so entertaining all ages of children wouldn't have been easy for my parents. But one activity they did organise is one I won't ever forget. We travelled to a little rural town called Beechworth, where some of the buildings and houses were still quite old, some even built in the 1800s. There were little Airbnb houses there that you could stay at. So, to my mum's interest in heritage buildings and houses, we booked a 5-bedroomed place that was probably only about 30 years old, just outside of town on a small property surrounded by lush grass and beautiful trees and creeks. My parents had found a tour experience of an old mental asylum just on the opposite end of town up on a hill. I'm not sure when this building was built, but the structure and layout of it suggested that it would have been the mid-1800s. So my father asked if any of us kids wanted to come along. Mind you, our ages ranged from 12 to 16 or so. Me, being the horror fan, I jumped at the offer first. On the night of this asylum tour, I was so excited, I thought to bring my camera to take photos to try and catch something in a picture. I got the odd orb or two, but nothing crazy. As we walked through all these old buildings with different types of rooms, I started to get a little bored with the fact that I wasn't catching anything on my phone. This started to make me, a 13-year-old, lose interest in the tour altogether. I remember at one point we were just standing in an orderly's main room where they would sit and do paperwork or just entertain themselves with whatever they could do on the night shift. During this time, the boredom grew even more intense, so I started to study the people in the tour group and made up scenarios in my head as to what I thought they did for a sport or employment or something. Going from person to person while the tour guide tells the group about this history of the room, I walked over and stood next to a lady that was part of the tour group. She was by herself and seemed very interested in the information the tour guide was giving, as she was just standing there looking at the tour guide with no break of concentration. I was a little weirded out by this, as everyone else was taking photos and pointing and whispering amongst each other about certain details of the room. So I awkwardly side-eyed this lady to see what she looked like, so I could guess what job or sport she might do. To my sadness and shock, this woman had severe scars on her face. And I'm a pretty empathetic person, so I immediately felt a sadness and started to wonder what had happened. Her glasses were crooked and her face was burnt as if she had perhaps fallen face first onto some burning coals. I eventually realised maybe I was being rude by subtly looking at her, and I didn't want her to get offended, so I decided to continue on with this little guessing game with the other people in the group. I left the room first to try and find something exciting about the next room, and then this went on and on. After a long 2 to 3 hour tour of this asylum, it came to an end with a lot of interesting stories. We headed home and it was about midnight when we got to the place that we were staying at. After my mother had asked how the tour was, my brother was complaining about a girl and her little brother that kept giggling and talking while the tour guide was talking, while my father was talking about the heritage and stories that came from the asylum. I chimed in about my little game I played about analysing people and eventually asked my father what would he think the lady with the glasses does for a living. He was confused as to what I was talking about, so I explained my little game to him and he responded with, "No, what lady are you talking about?" And I had said, "The lady I was standing next to in the orderly's room." And he said, "There was no lady there." In that moment, my father's face dropped and my mum said that I went instantly white and my eyes glazed over. I felt sick and started accusing them of trying to mess with me and saying it wasn't funny. My father now said that as he was the last person leaving with the tour guide, the guide told him quietly so that the younger people wouldn't hear, that once there was a lady that was non-verbal and immobile at times. She used to love sitting in front of the big brick open fireplace. The orderlies had grown a sympathetic fondness for this lady due to her having a rough life with no family members to take care of her. So each night they would bring her in and sit her on a chair in front of the fire. The orderly on duty watching said woman had needed to use the bathroom and felt safe that she would be fine there for a couple of minutes due to her immobility. Once the orderly returned, he found her face down in the fire and dead. To my father's shock and disbelief, he went through his camera roll on his phone looking for a lady with glasses. Amid scrolling through photos, he found some that he took in the orderly's room. In the picture, you could see me standing off to the side with my back leaning on the wall, but I was about 10 feet away from everyone and by myself. I've been back there twice, and I now appreciate all the heritage and structure of the buildings, but this time, being a little more conscious of the people around me. Oh, that is such a good story. And, you know, those places, those old school lunatic asylums, mental asylums, whatever they've been previously called, they are, like I've always said, they are places of such intense high energy. But when you were like a young teenager, you're like, oh, honk shoe, this is so boring. I don't care about the history of this place. And you know what, Joel? As an adult, I play that game regularly. That game of, I'm so bored in this situation, so I'm going to check out these strangers and make up stories about their lives. I do it on the regularly, and it is a great game to play. If you are in a situation where you are really bored and you don't want to be there, if you check out random strangers around you and try and look for clues about their lives based on what they're wearing and, you know, how they carry themselves, it's a very interesting way to pass the time. But obviously, in playing that game, you found yourself next to a ghost without even realising. And obviously then there will have been questions around what actually happened to this woman in that period of time. I'm sure there are plenty of cases and plenty of stories about patients within these asylums that actually were treated well. You know, we always imagine that everybody is treated horrendously, but that's not necessarily the case. And often, like I always say, you know, the vast majority of workers in these asylums were people who were genuinely doing their best with the resources that they had and the knowledge that they had at the time. It doesn't obviously excuse things that happened in these asylums, but this woman was obviously somebody who was looked after to a certain degree by the orderlies. And obviously it begs the question, what the heck happened to her that she was immobile and then ended up in the fire? And I mean, if for this woman, if this was the kind of only place in the world in her lifetime where she had been treated relatively well, then it would make sense that she would hang around, right? And I wonder if people see her regularly and just don't realise. And I also think that even if you didn't have the kind of picture evidence of the fact that you were standing alone and weren't standing next to a woman in that particular orderly's room, unfortunately, if you saw somebody in a group of people that had significant scarring on their face, you would remember it. You know, you'd take note of it and you'd remember it. So even if the pictures weren't there, I'd imagine even your dad being like, there was nobody standing next to you, would be enough. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Mayia and Joel for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 13th of April 2025. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.